Yes, she's on. Oh, she's hooked up. Great. Okay, we're live. Okay, we're live. And I've got not quite 6 o'clock, so is anybody's clock watching, just in case? Oh, 6 o'clock. There we go. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Beaumont City Council regular council meeting for Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024, 6 p.m. here in City Council chambers. I want to just get us all started with our land acknowledgement, as we always start every meeting. That is, the city of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all First Peoples of this land, whether it be a First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich farming communities across the land. As we gather here in Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis Nation, we acknowledge that we are all treaty people and have ongoing responsibilities to protect and honor the treaty and the inherent rights of people and the land. With that, two short announcements. Councilor Monkoff-Swain is traveling with his work and unable to join us this evening. And Councilor McCook, Deputy Mayor, is with us remotely. Kat, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Sorry, Councilor McCook, sorry. You
know
what? Okay. Yeah. 1.2 on our agenda. We have 5 proclamations this evening. So, all right, let's get right started. Usually 1 or 2. We got 5. Workers' Compensation Day of Mourning, April 28th, 2024. Whereas April 28th is recognized across Canada as the day to mourn victims of workplace accidents and for the renewal of the pledge to make workplaces safer. And whereas in 2023, 165 Alberta workers died from injuries or disease related to the workplace. And whereas in honoring their memory, employers and workers can make a difference by working together to keep each other safe every day. And whereas the city of Beaumont recognizes April 28th as a day to mourn victims of workplace accidents and bring awareness to the need to establish safe conditions in the workplace for all. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Bill Danyluk, do hereby proclaim April 28th, 2024 as Workers' Compensation Day of Mourning, City of Beaumont, Alberta, dated 23rd of April, 2024. Hydrogen Week, April 22nd to 26th, 2024. Whereas the city of Beaumont is proud of the Edmonton region's long-standing relationship and leadership and expertise in the energy sector. And whereas the city of Beaumont is confident that the Edmonton region's abundant talent, infrastructure, and resources will position Canada as tomorrow's global hydrogen superpower. And whereas the Edmonton region is a national leader in clean energy, has the experience, infrastructure, and resources to produce low-cost, low-carbon hydrogen at a global scale. And whereas the world is transitioning to a net zero future, the city of Beaumont is ready to move aggressively as a leader within the Edmonton region to take advantage of the $2.5 trillion global opportunity for Alberta and Canada. And whereas the Edmonton region can help meet domestic and global demand and decarbonization efforts, and whereas the city of Beaumont stands ready to help meet Canada's emissions reduction goals using hydrogen, and whereas Canadian and international leaders from across the entire hydrogen value chain are coming together to discuss and invest in the future of hydrogen sector at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention from April 23rd to 25th, 2024 in Edmonton, Alberta. And whereas the week of April 22nd to 26th, 2024 represents an opportunity for the Edmonton region to showcase its unique strengths in hydrogen production, adoption, use, and innovation. And whereas Canada's path to net zero runs through the Edmonton region, now therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor Bill Danyluk, hereby proclaim April 22nd to 26th, 2024 as Hydrogen Week in the city of Beaumont, dated April 23rd, 2024. Give me a second. All right. Economic Development Week, May 6th to 10th, 2024. Whereas communities rely on economic development professionals to promote economic well-being and the quality of life. For communities like the city of Beaumont, that means coordinating activities like create, retain, and expand jobs in order to facilitate growth, enhance wealth, and provide a stable tax base. And whereas economic developers stimulate and incubate entrepreneurship in order to help establish the next generation of new businesses, which is the hallmark of Alberta's economy. And whereas economic developers are engaged in a wide variety of settings, including rural and urban, local, state, provincial, and federal governments, public-private partnerships, chambers of commerce, universities, and a variety of other institutions. And whereas economic developers attract and retain high-quality jobs, develop vibrant communities, and improve the quality of life in their regions. And whereas economic developers are engaged in a wide variety of settings, including rural and urban, local, state, provincial, and federal governments, private, public partnerships, chambers of commerce, universities, and a wide variety of other institutions. And whereas economic developers work in the city of Beaumont, now therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor Bill Danlick, do hereby proclaim May 6th to 10th, 2024 as Economic Development Week in the city of Beaumont, dated 23rd of April, 2024. Municipal Clerks Week. This is a big one, right? This is the most important one, right? Can I say that? I guess I just did, didn't I? Okay. Municipal Clerks Week, May 5th to 11th, 2024. Whereas the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government that exists throughout the world. And whereas the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk is the oldest among public servants. And whereas the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk provides a professional link between the citizens, local governing bodies, and agencies of the government at all other levels. And whereas professional municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of the neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. And whereas a professional municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community. And whereas professional municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, provincial, county, international professional organizations. And whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor Bill Danlick, do hereby proclaim May 5th to 11th, 2024 as Municipal Clerks Week in the city of Beaumont, Alberta, dated 23rd of April, 2024. Sorry. Are we having word counting today? Are we counting words? North American Occupational Safety and Health Week, May 6th to 11th, 2024. Whereas May 6th to 11th has been designated as this year's North American Occupational Safety and Health Week, and whereas NOASH is the acronym, week was first launched in June 1997, marked by the agreement between Canada, United States, and Mexico, and symbolizes joint venture, cooperation, and commitment to the common goals shared by all occupational health and safety partners. And whereas the goal during Safety and Health Week is to focus employers, employees, partners, and the public on the importance of preventing injury and illness in the workplace, at home, in the community. And whereas the city of Beaumont recognizes May 6th to 11th as North American Occupational Safety and Health Week to bring awareness for the need to establish a healthy and safe workplace for all. Now therefore be resolved that I, Mayor Bill Danlick, do hereby proclaim May 6th to 11th, 2024 as North American Occupational Safety and Health Week, City of Beaumont, dated April 23rd, 2024. That concludes our proclamations this evening. Next on our agenda is adoption of the agenda. Madam Clerk, any changes to our agenda this evening?
We have no changes to the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there the motion to adopt the agenda on the screen, please? Member Council willing to move the motion of the adoption of the agenda? Councillor Penrod. Oh, hang on. There we go. Your mic's on now.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that the April 23rd, 2024 council agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll ask you to vote on the motion before you. Councillor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Council. That passes unanimously, 6-0. Next on our agenda, open forum. Any guests, Madam Clerk, from open forum this evening? None. Thank you. Next on our agenda is item 4, consent agenda. Would you please put the consent agenda on the screen, Madam Clerk? I'll ask a member of council to move the agenda for consent.
Mr. Mayor.
If you could, please, that'd be great. Thanks.
Sure. There are a few, so bear with me. So on consent, we have item 5.1, the regular council meetings from April 9th, that the April 9th, 2024 council meeting minutes be approved as presented. Item 5.2, special council meeting minutes from April 16th, that the April 16th, 2024 special council meeting minutes be approved as presented. Item 7.3, strategic plan update, that the April 23rd, 2024 report, council strategic plan update, I believe Q1 2024 be received for information. Item 7.4, Arts Advisory Committee meeting amendment, that council approve the addition of 2 meetings for the Arts Advisory Committee to address funding for the arts grants. Item 7.5, annual council meeting schedule amendment, that the council meeting scheduled for May 14th, 2024, with the start time of 6 p.m. be changed to start at 5 p.m. and that administration provide the prescribed notice to the public of the time change. Item 12.1, regional initiatives update, that the April 23rd, 2024 report, regional initiatives update, be received for information, and that the report remain private pursuant to the Freedom of and Information of Protection. Sorry, let me try that again. To the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, sections 21 and 24, and section item 12.2, report appointment of public members to council committees to address vacancies, that the appointments set out in the April 23rd, 2024 report, appointment of public members to council committees to address vacancies, be approved, and that the report remain private pursuant to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, sections 17 and 29.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any changes to the consent agenda from any members of council? Councilor McCook, do you have any changes to the consent agenda before I ask for a motion to approve?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Member council willing to move the motion to accept consent agenda as presented. Councilor Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased to move the motion.
Oh, yep, here. I got you on. There you are.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased to move the motion as presented.
Thank you, Councilor. Discussion on the motion from members of council. Seeing none, council, would you please vote on the consent agenda as circulated or presented, pardon me. Councilor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councilor. That also carries unanimously, 6-0 on consent agenda. All right, next on our agenda is item 6.1, public hearings, bylaw 1050-24, closure of a portion of 42 Avenue, second and third readings. Madam Clerk, would you please outline the public hearing procedure, please?
Thank you very much. So welcome everyone to the April 23rd, 2024 City of Beaumont public hearing on bylaw 1050-24, closure of a portion of 42nd Avenue in the Rousseau neighborhood. Public hearings are an opportunity to speak to council on advertised bylaws or certain resolutions. I'll spend a few moments providing an overview of the public hearing procedures as set out in our meetings procedures bylaw 1014-22. We have been accepting written submissions in the week preceding the public hearing. The deadline for written submissions was noon on April 23rd, 2024. We have not received any written submissions for this public hearing. Registration to present at the public hearing by electronic means was required by 4 p.m. on April 22nd, 2024. Registration to present in person is permitted in advance of the public hearing or here today at the public hearing. Mayor Dan-elect, so far we have not received any registered speakers for today's public hearing. The procedure for the public hearing will be as follows. Administration will first make a presentation on the bylaw. Next, members of the public who are registered to speak or those who are present here and would like to speak will be invited to make their respective presentations. If anyone here if anyone here has not yet registered to speak and would like to do so, please raise your hand and we will get your name and add you to the list of presenters. Council will hear first from those who are in favor of the bylaw and then those who are opposed and then anyone else who wishes to be heard. Presenters will have up to 5 minutes to present and then council will have the opportunity to ask any questions of clarification. If you are presenting, please ensure that the microphone or audio is working before you begin, and please state your full name. Your 5 minutes will start when your presentation starts, and there will be a clock on the screen in front of you to help you track your time. Please remain at the mic once you are done presenting, since council may ask you questions following your presentation. Once council has heard all the presentations, the public hearing will be closed, and the regular session of council will reconvene so that council may make a decision on the matter. On a final note, the city's public hearings are recorded as a webcast, which will be made available for viewing on the city's website. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So with that, I will declare the public hearing open at this time, and we'll have the presentation first, then open the public hearing. Open first. I had it right. Okay, good. Public hearing is now open. I'll now entertain administration to make their presentation on bylaw 1050-24. Your microphone is on and please begin after you state your name for the record. When you're ready, please.
Good evening, Mayor Daniluk and members of council. My name is Georgina Campos, and I'm a development planner with Development Services team. I'm joined this evening by Sean Hipkiss, Manager of Development Services. This evening's presentation follows administration's report to council on April 9th, where council gave first reading to bylaw 1050-24, closure of a portion of 42 Avenue in the Rousseau neighborhood. Administration is here to present bylaw 1050-24 for council's consideration of second and third reading following public hearing.
Being uncooperative.
No, there we go.
There you go.
All right. Administration received a request to close a portion of road along 42 Avenue, north of Rousseau School site, as shown on the context map. The proposed closure area was previously registered as municipal roadway to be used as a temporary turnaround and construction access to the school site. This area is now being proposed to be closed and consolidated with the adjacent private property owned by Qualico Developments West Limited. Access for school buses and other vehicles will be maintained through 42 Avenue, and a new road and a temporary turnaround will be constructed further east of its current location as part of the Rousseau Phase 7 subdivision approval shown on yellow, in yellow in the map. The proposed road closure aligns with the approved Rousseau neighborhood outline plan, where the new road alignment will allow for future build out of residential lots directly north and will enable the construction of 42 Avenue. For a permanent road closure to occur, a road closure bylaw must be passed by council following notification to adjacent landowners and affected parties and a public hearing. After a road closure bylaw is approved by council, a sales agreement along with a bylaw are registered and consolidated with the adjacent private property at Alberta Land Titles. On March 25th, mailed notices were sent to adjacent landowners notifying them of the sale of land and public hearing. Since March 29th, administration has placed advertisements for the public hearing in the March 29th and April 12th editions of La Nouvelle. Administration recommends that following public hearing, council give bylaw 1050-24, closure of a portion of 42 Avenue in the Rousseau neighborhood, second and third readings. Thank you, and we're open to questions.
Thank you very much. Any members of council have any questions for administration's report on this bylaw? Councilor Telebus, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. I had asked this earlier, and I just want to make sure it's 100% certain that in our professional opinions on the development side, that this land can't really be used for much else. A couple options I had proposed is maybe a basketball court, something along those lines. The response that was given previously was that we didn't feel it was sufficient in terms of amount of land to put something like that on there. I just want to confirm that that's still the case.
Through the mayor, thank you for your question. I will try answering it, and I'll defer to Sean if there's anything else to answer. But yes, to confirm that this area is now dedicated as a public road. It's not a municipal reserve or environmental reserve. It hasn't been planned for any sort of activation. It is as part of the Rousseau outline plan, planned for residential development.
Mr. Hipkiss?
Yeah, I guess I can help out a little bit as well. For this year, it's all part of the overarching plans that have been approved already along the way. So to make any kind of changes now for something like this would be problematic in especially the design of the neighborhood and community as it's being built out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, hang on, Councilor, your mic wasn't off. Your mic's back on again.
Thank you for that. So I guess it's just for a little clarity, because originally I was told that it was not suitable for something like that. Is that correct, or is that incorrect?
That is correct.
Okay, and then just a last question, just want to confirm that the intention is for future build out of existing lots, not increasing density or adding additional housing units to the existing plan?
Thank you, through the mayor. It is proposed as part of the subdivision. There's the number of lots have been already approved and are in alignment with the Russo outline plan.
Perfect, thank you so much.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor McCook, do you have any questions by any chance? I see your hands up now. Counselor, you have the floor.
Yeah, I do. Just clarity. It says on the map there's a location of future temporary. Oh, it just refreshed on me. Future temporary turnaround. Is this something that will there always need to be a turnaround? Like, is there planned for future, or like why do we need a second location now? Or am I misreading this?
Through the mayor, thank you. Thank you for your question. Typically with a new subdivision application, the approval will, depending on engineering's recommendation, will ask for a temporary turnaround just to make sure that there's connectivity through the neighborhood and sufficient access. The temporary turnaround is temporary and it will be built out to the satisfaction of the municipality in terms of meeting the general design standards once the subdivision is being built out.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's it for me, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor. Any further questions, members of council for administration on their presentation on bylaw 1050-24? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. At this time, I'll open the public hearing to anybody who deems they want to speak for in favor of the bylaw. Anybody in public? Oh,
Miss-
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to advise that we have no registered speakers and no additional members of the public indicating they wish to speak. So
Right.
you can close the public hearing when you're
Okay.
ready.
I will do that. Thank you, Madam Clerk. With that, I declare the public hearing closed on this issue. And so I will ask for a member of council to move second reading of this bylaw, and we will then begin debate of the bylaw once the motion is on the floor. Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor. Oh, hang on. I turned it on. I think you turned it off.
I'm supposed to be turning it. Thank you, Mayor. I move that bylaw 1050-24, closure of a portion of 42nd Avenue in the Russo neighborhood, be given second reading.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you wish to speak to second reading at this time? If you want to speak to it yourself?
I'm in favor of the bylaw as it stands right now, so I don't have anything to add.
Thank you, Counselor. You can turn your mic off if you want. I got it. Thank you. I'll turn them on. You guys turn them off. Okay. Any further comments or questions or debate from members of council on second reading? Councilor McCook, do you have any questions or concerns for debate for second reading?
No, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor. Any further opportunity for debate or discussion or questions on second reading? Seeing none, I'll ask council to then vote on second reading of the bylaw. Councilor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. Council, that carries unanimously, 6-0. I'll now entertain a motion for members of council on third reading of bylaw 1050-24. Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that bylaw 1050-24 be given third reading.
Thank you, Councillor. You wish to speak to third reading?
Just to say, I'm not always in favor of moving through readings in quick succession, but in this case, sounds like what we have in front of us is essentially a bit of a blip in our planning process, and we're just remediating that. The land in question is already approved for the use that it will go back to. I don't see any need to drag this out any further. So
Thank
happy
you,
to move
Counselor.
into third reading.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Any other members of council on third reading? Seeing none, council, I'll ask you to vote on third reading of the bylaw. Councilor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor. That carries unanimously, 6-0 on bylaw 1050-24. Thank you, administration, for your efforts on this, and thank you to the public for your input on the public hearing, which was minimal, but that's okay. Sometimes there's many, sometimes there's not. Next on our agenda is item 7.1, water management strategy. House administration, may join us at the table. Please introduce yourselves and begin your presentation when you're ready, please. Whenever you're ready. Yeah, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I am Ryan Orlovsky, Manager of Utility and Facility Operations from Infrastructure. Here with me presenting tonight is Tanisha Kotowicz and Michelle Zhang from Strategists from Communications. Although the three of us are presenting tonight, several departments, including Infrastructure, Communications, Legal, and Protective Services contribute to enhancing this strategy. Yeah, it's not working.
Just be a second. We'll get it figured out for you.
All right.
You go one too far or no?
All right.
There we go.
All right.
Thank you.
Before delving into our strategy, I'll provide context for why administration is updating. Alberta recently experienced an unusually dry winter, characterized by low snowfall and above average temperatures. This has contributed to the drought conditions across the province as depicted in the latest drought conditions map on the screen. Due to these conditions, most reservoir levels are below normal for this time of year, and challenges are expected as we move into the high demand water months. Adding to these supply concerns, the rapid expansion of both the city of Beaumont and Alberta as a whole is intensifying water demand and further straining of these already stressed conditions. In response to these conditions, Alberta Environment has reached out to municipalities, urging them to review and enhance their water management strategies. This year, Beaumont encountered 2 instances of water restrictions, one due to unforeseen outage at the EPCOR plant servicing the Edmonton area, and another stemming from upgrades from the Water Commission fill station in Beaumont. Both these challenges have been successfully addressed and the restrictions lifted. The experiences provided valuable insights into the effectiveness of our current strategy and highlighted areas where enhancements could be made. This brings us to our purpose of the presentation tonight, to implement a proactive strategy which updates and refines water management practices, restrictions, and the utility bylaw for future resilience. These measures are crucial for the coming season and moving forward to ensure the city has sufficient water levels for essential uses such as fire protection and drinking water. The first area that was identified as requiring updates is our utility bylaw, which administration is recommending be renamed the Water and Wastewater Management Bylaw. This revised bylaw encompasses crucial elements such as outlining water restriction demand measures based on the Water Commission's recommendations and in alignment with other municipalities, introducing penalties and enforcement measures for noncompliance, and clearly defining user responsibilities regarding water and wastewater management. This new bylaw will be presented later tonight in more detail. However, I'll highlight the demand measures with a focus on internal city operation measures. Administration's recommendation is to implement 3 demand measures or restriction levels. The demand measure A, labeled as a water conservation advisory, represents the lowest level of restrictions. Demand measure B introduces a partial water ban, while the highest restriction level, demand measure C, imposes a mandatory water restriction. Demand measure A, also known as the Water Conservation Advisory, primarily impacts internal city operations. This includes reducing spray park hours and suspending non-essential water use activities, such as water and sewer flushing, park watering, street sweeping, fleet vehicle washing, and certain firefighting that utilizes water. Additionally, water users are encouraged to limit outdoor watering to specific hours for optimal for reducing evaporation. Demand measure B, also referred to as the partial water ban, has implications for both city operations and water users. City operations will discontinue non-essential water activities such as the spray park, hydrant meter usage, private development and infrastructure commissioning, private development flushing, water quality investigations, and all demand A suspensions. For water users, outdoor watering is limited to house number with specific hours with a maximum of 2 hours allowed per day. Hand watering of flower beds, vegetable gardens, and similar activity would be permissible at any time using a watering can or a hose with a nozzle equipped with a shutoff to restrict water flow. Demand measure C, also known as the mandatory water restrictions, represents the most stringent level of restrictions reserved for extreme circumstances. Under these measures, city operations will suspend water use for the BSRC pools, hot tub, all water features and fountains, along with implementing all demand A and B measures. Water users will be limited to essential use only, prohibiting all outdoor water activities. Additionally, water use will be restricted for all high demand water users. Further details on these restrictions will be provided on the bylaw report later tonight. There are various demand triggers for water demand measures or restrictions that the city will implement, which are noted on the screen. The utility team is working on implementing advanced forecasting within our water system software to assist in predicting reservoir levels, contributing to these triggers. It is also important to note that each community in the province is unique and will have different triggers that affect their restrictions. This means that the City of Beaumont may implement measures before the Water Commission or other municipalities, or measures may be at a different level. These measures will be placed into effect due to our own unique circumstances, considering all these triggers with the intent on preventing further or stronger measures. Communication is a significant part of our strategy, and Tanisha will further elaborate on this aspect.
Thank you, Ryan. When considering the role that water users play in our strategy, it is crucial to acknowledge that we are dealing with people. Now, we recognize that there are several types of water users, but regardless of their form, we are looking to take them from their current state to a new one, getting them to demonstrate modified and potentially new behaviors. So what we are talking about is change management. Changing human behavior requires a clear vision of how we want users to think, to feel, and to act. To guide our approach to this change, we've established 3 key pillars. They are transparency, empowerment, and compliance. Now, I want to walk you through what each of these looks like. Transparency means that users understand the water demand measures, they receive strategic updates on water management efforts, and they know what to expect depending on the situation or environment. Empowerment is simple. It means that users feel part of the solution. Whether it's through practical water saving strategies or water conservation tips, they are motivated to conserve water. And finally, compliance is a direct reflection of how we want users to act. To encourage change behaviors with the goal of water conservation, this means we must establish clear guidelines and expectations, recognize and reward compliance, all while continuously monitoring our reporting mechanisms for feedback and opportunities to optimize. Now that we've established the changes that we will encourage and inspire in our water users, I will walk you through some of the risks we've identified and how they present as opportunities for our water management strategy. Now, as I walk you through these risks, you'll start to notice potentially the strategy taking shape. The first risk that we've identified is misinformation. Now, whether it's false claims or inaccurate information, misinformation can lead to a lack of compliance. Given the unique nuances of each municipality's water management strategy, as Ryan outlined, we must speak with a unified voice, directing users to a centralized source for accurate and practical information. Now, this involves leveraging educational and awareness campaigns, local media, and our esteemed council serving as community ambassadors. The second area we've identified is non-compliance. Now, often we think about users being non-compliant, it's because they either perceive these changes as inconvenient or perhaps they disagree with the measures as a whole. However, non-compliance can also be a lack of awareness or maybe a misunderstanding of the restrictions. To encourage compliance, we need to focus on targeted educational campaigns, regularly check how they're performing, and adjust when necessary. Also, being open about the rules and how we enforce them helps create a culture where users understand and follow the guidelines. The third risk that we've identified is communication overload. Now, when it comes to communication overload, it could be because of the amount of information. It could also be due to the complexity of the information. And this can leave users feeling apathetic, anxious, rather than the desired state of feeling empowered with this information. Navigating the risk of communication overload demands clear, streamlined messaging through easily accessible channels. And here, council members play a pivotal role in directing users to a single information hub. Now, the final risk that we've identified is related to maintaining calm. During periods with several restrictions for prolonged periods, it is crucial to maintain calm. Amidst the scarcity of a vital resource like water, users can exhibit resource hoarding, competition, non-compliance, and potentially confrontational behaviors. Proactive, transparent messaging empowers users with knowledge, curbing behaviors like hoarding, and fostering positive conservation practices. Recognizing and reinforcing these behaviors further encourages that compliance. So by being proactive and transparent with our messaging and giving them the knowledge and curbing those behaviors, it's essential to empower those residents with correct, practical, and strategic information that we can encourage conversation efforts. I'm going to pass the floor along to Michelle, who will further dive into our strategy.
Thank you, Tanisha. So our communications strategy involves a multifaceted approach that launched yesterday on April 22nd and will span the spring and summer. Throughout these months, as Tanisha mentioned, we will leverage our guiding principles of transparency, empowerment, and compliance to educate residents on the reality of drought conditions and empower them to do what they can and play their part in water conservation efforts. Our strategy emphasizes a collaborative approach involving all local stakeholders and highlights the importance of residents, businesses, and the city working together as a team to achieve water conservation. It's also important to note that this strategy is dynamic and will go through adaptations and refinements as we receive feedback and data throughout the coming months. So there are 3 key phases in our strategy here. The first being education and awareness, the second being the ban phase, and lastly, the recovery phase. In the education and awareness phase, our focus is on transparently communicating and educating our residents about the reality of drought conditions in Alberta. We're also focused on offering practical water conservation tips for them to incorporate into their daily routines that empower them to take ownership of water saving efforts in their homes. In the ban phase, our priority is to clearly communicate specific restrictions on water usage, provide regular updates on the progress of bans and any changes that occur, and reinforce the importance of compliance in preserving Beaumont's water supply. Lastly, in the recovery phase, we are mainly focused on communicating the lifting of water restrictions, but we are also acknowledging residents' compliance and efforts during the ban phase and highlighting the collective impact that we made as a community. This is an often overlooked but crucial component for community morale because it fosters a sense of unity, pride, and appreciation among residents for their contributions and encourages continued support and participation in future conservation efforts. As mentioned in the education and awareness phase, we are focused on providing residents with the practical water saving strategies for their homes. We've categorized these tips into indoor and outdoor sections and further divided them by beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels. This approach allows residents to begin their water conservation journey at a level that feels right for them or fits their current situation and also prevents overwhelming them with just a long list of suggestions. Now, we are aware that some of our advanced tips are not immediately actionable, and our goal with these advanced tips is to plant a seed in their minds and prompt them to consider these long-term conservation strategies for the future. For example, while someone may not immediately think about upgrading to water-efficient appliances, it is now something that's on their radar, and they may consider this the next time they purchase a new home. So on the screen here, we've included a few examples of beginner, intermediate, and advanced tips. Beginner tips including fixing leaks around the house, turning off your taps, Intermediate tips being utilizing rain barrels and installing water-saving devices in your home, such as faucet aerators and low-flow shower heads. And advanced tips are things such as water-efficient appliances and implementing gray water recycling into your home. In terms of tactics to connect residents to this information, as Tanisha mentioned earlier, we have created a centralized information hub on our website where residents can access information about drought conditions, water saving tips, links to external resources, and eventually water ban updates if need be. So essentially, this is a one-stop shop where they can find all the information they need. As we move through the phases of this strategy, we'll employ a range of tactics to connect residents to this centralized information hub. These tactics include digital media and print materials and will continuously be evaluated and refined as we move through the strategy and receive feedback and data. We will also rely on leveraging our community ambassadors, which would include yourselves, Council, to maximize community involvement and buy-in. So throughout the coming months, we encourage you to share water conservation content on your platforms, reinforce the importance of being water wise in conversations with residents, and lead by example to inspire community participation.
Thank you for your time tonight. That concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Very informative. Any questions from members of council for administration's presentation on the water management strategy? Councilor Newkirk, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I think an important piece of this as you move forward is to acknowledge early on in the presentation that we're a member of the Capital Region Southwest Water Services Commission. I think that was probably a piece of information that should come forward at the beginning of the presentation. Later on in the demand measure triggers, we do make mention of that, but you know, the root of a whole bunch of the information used to make this presentation actually comes from the technical document entitled Water Demand Measures from there. So I think it would serve well for the community just for some clarity around where this comes from. So, you know, we're a member of the commission. We sign on to the commission, and the commission has the water demand strategies that are developed and reviewed, the policies reviewed, the technical document guides water demand levels. And, you know, that's where it's coming from. In the past, when we've had to put these water demand levels in, it's been an opportunity for education, I guess, for the public to allow them to understand or help them understand that we're a member of that commission. So, you know, I would tighten that up a bit just to make it more clear around us being a member, what the water demand measures mean. I think you guys did a really good job of personalizing it to Beaumont, right? Because the water demand measures are a little bit more generic in the document, and then what you're able to do well in here, you know, throughout the examples where there was city operations and water users, really personalize it. So I think you guys really hit the mark on that. This conversation today is an easy one. I think in the coming days, it's going to become more trying in all municipalities. So thank you for coming early with this conversation, and I appreciate your effort.
Thank you, Councilor. I appreciate that. And I'll echo some of Councilman Newkirk's comments. It's hard to educate the public. We all are very much aware of that. And we take our lead off the Water Commission. The Water Commission's responsibility is to make sure there's water for all the members on an equal level basis. You can't have water in Beaumont and not in Devon or Leduc. It's got to be the same for everybody. And the priority for us is to have water for fire protection and personal hygiene and cooking. Lawns are kind of second fiddle compared to the first two items. Of course, even the water part, despite the weather, sometimes is not a high priority. And it was difficult to educate the public. And I applaud the efforts. We're trying to be a little more proactive, given the anticipated drought this season is going to have for us. And I echo Councilor Newkirk's comments that help educate the public that, you know, the Water Commission sets the rules and we follow them. What we're trying to do is give it a good education to our residents. And the less water they use, the more money they save too, which is not a bad thing, all things being equal. But Councilor Newkirk read my mind on that comment. I do appreciate that. So Councilor Barnhart, I have you next on speaking.
Thank you, Mayor. Not exactly sure what's going on with the mics, but they don't go green, they go right to red.
Yeah, it's weird.
least
Once
mine
we're
did.
done this, we'll have a look at that in a second. Let's just continue. But I thought,
Apologize.
for
I
some
didn't
reason, I saw nothing on my screen, but please continue. We'll look at it in the next break here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
comments aside about the commission, I totally agree that is our source of water and how we work collaboratively in the region to make sure that we have sufficient water. But I want to applaud the proactive nature of this strategy. I think it's coming at the issues very much from an education perspective, and I really think that's important. I like the transparency of it. Some of the goals I had in mind when I was reading it is it's forward thinking, it's looking ahead, it's environmentally conscious, it's raising the bar as far as what we expect our residents to do. So I really am thankful to see it here. I think you did a great job on that. My question is about kind of the big picture. If we get to a point, and I'm sure that the commission would be part of this as well, but if we get to a point where we are in danger of not having sufficient water for the necessities that we need here in Beaumont, whose responsibility is that? Does that go beyond the city to the commission, to the province? Just speak a bit to that. What would be the next step in terms of dealing with an emergency if it was to happen? Don't want to be a negative Nelly, but that could happen.
Through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart, it would be up to the city's responsibility to find, I guess, alternate resources to provide the water. It wouldn't be up to the water commission. It'd be up to the city to find that.
So the city and the water commission together would be responsible for that. It's not the provinces. We would be the first line of defense on that.
Right.
Okay. I think the other question that I had, Mayor, if I may, just one
Please.
further. You referenced a couple of times in your comments that later tonight we would be dealing with the fees, the penalties. Actually, we've already approved them, I think, if I'm not mistaken, as part of the bylaw that was in the consent agenda. Am I correct on that? Okay. I wonder if you could just speak to how that would be implemented. How are we enforcing those compliance issues?
Through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart, the presentation later tonight's the utility bylaw update, and so it'll be going through the bylaw that references these demand measures and the penalties and stuff that will be in place for them.
I'm wondering if we've dealt with that already. That was my
Madam
question.
Clerk?
Sure, I can provide a little clarity. When we originally prepared the report, we anticipated having the bylaw as part of the presented items, but we did put it on consent. So yes, the bylaw was approved by consent. So if I can answer Councillor Barnhart's question through the mayor, this would be dealt with the way any of our bylaws, like community standards bylaws, would be dealt with. So typically you would have someone make a complaint that someone was in violation of the bylaw, and enforcement would usually take an education first approach. And then if they could not resolve the matter, then they would just proceed with a ticket, just as you would under the community standards bylaw.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. And if members of the public wanted to see what those penalties were, that bylaw is available for them to see that online.
It's in the agenda package, and it will be updated on our website following today's meeting, or they can contact our office and we can send them a copy directly. But it will be on the public website on the bylaws page, along with all our other bylaws.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you again for the work on this.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll go to Councillor Penrod, followed by Councilman Newkirk for a follow-up question. Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a procedural double check, and maybe that I just missed this, but in my agenda, I have 8.2 bylaw 1052-24 flagged as potentially being on the consent agenda, but in my notes, the consent agenda that we actually approved does not include 8.2. Did I miss that?
Madam Clerk?
Thank you very much, Councillor Penrod. You are correct. So we will have to deal with those readings once we get to that bylaw. Sorry, that was an oversight on our part. It was not in fact on the consent agenda, so we will make sure that we deal with that once we get to that bylaw.
And just to note, the same is true for
Or
8.3.
Yes, I see that. Okay. So we'll have lots of fun with motions when we get there. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty then. Thank you, Councillor Penrod. Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Natelibus.
Yeah, you bet. So in February, I did a little bit of foreshadowing and I asked some questions about how much water our spray park uses. So I'm gonna regale with some numbers right now because this is exactly why I asked the questions around that. So we talked about water demand A and water demand B and C, and when the spray park turns off and why. And basically in 2023, with the spray park at 8 hours a day, the water usage was estimated at 4.4 million liters a month, 149,000 liters per day, which translates to 18,625 liters per hour of water. Big water usage out of the spray park. And over a 3-month period, that results in 13.4 million liters of water being used in the spray park, and it's one-time use water in our spray park. So, there's a lot of numbers there. That was included as a councillor inquiry back in February. So it is, that the answer to that is obviously public information, and that's why I brought it forward here. And then in 2022, on a 12-hour day operating, all those numbers are bigger, quite bigger, right? So it's very, very important for residents to understand, because I know one of the first friction points is the spray park being turned off in water demand situations. But I just really, really want everyone to understand the amount of water, treated water, that is used in that apparatus. We love it. There's good usage of it, but it's turned off in these water demand situations for good reason. And there's millions of reasons right there, as millions of liters of water are used there. So anyhow, this was the opportune time to bring that forward and remind everyone of that usage. So thank you, Mayor.
Nope, that was a great inquiry. I was expecting those numbers, but they're actually higher than I thought they were going to be. So that's a very good information to have. I appreciate that. Councilor Telebas, followed by Councilor McCook.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I think anyone would be naive to assume that there isn't a shortage of water, especially when we hit some of those hot months and the drought concerns that do exist within Alberta and all across the world, realistically.
Sorry, Nathan.
No worries. So it's important that we come up with an approach. I do just have a couple of concerns in terms of communication. I know we're going to get into the bylaw here, but within the bylaw, it says city will do its best to give 24-hour notice. That doesn't give people a lot of time to receive the message. So I did appreciate the comment that was made that in terms of enforcement, we'll always go the education route first. And I hope that is the approach we take, because we're looking at fines of $500 here, which is pretty significant. So my only concern would be the communication side. 24 hours isn't much. To be able to deal with that. And then I guess second to that, you guys had mentioned reward compliance. So what's kind of that approach? What kind of reward system are we looking at for those that are complying?
Through the mayor to Councillor Natellenbos. When we speak about rewarding, it's a lot of intrinsic value for residents to feel like they are part of a larger purpose. So when we look at motivating, it's a lot of intrinsic motivation to say, when you look at your neighbors and you look at your community and you look at the larger region that we're part of, we're all here working towards that same goal, which is that constant reminder of having potable water for drinking and resources for firefighting.
Perfect, thank you. Just one last comment, and this will probably be a follow-up motion that I put down the line here, but I've been to the spray park, for example, which I do feel consumes a lot of water, but it's an essential part for the kids to go out and have fun. But I've also been there where it's completely empty and water spraying. So maybe exploring some other opportunities where there's a switch that we put in place where people can turn it on when they're actually using it, as opposed to water being wasted. But that's secondary to this conversation. I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate that. One thing I can say on the notice period, having served the Water Commission for the last almost 7 years, notice in the Water Commission usually tends to be 48 to 72 hours. Sometimes it's only 24. Due for some foreseen circumstances at the Water Commission level, they try and anticipate usage restrictions, but sometimes unforeseen, it becomes very, very short. So point taken on the notice period. But if the Water Commission only gives us 24 hours notice, it's usually because of the Water Commission having to make a very snap decision. Normally we try and give the Water Commission 48 to 72 hours, sometimes 4 or 5 days of an anticipated usage constriction. So point taken, but sometimes it is unforeseen circumstances, just to address your concerns best I could based on my own experience. I have Councillor McCook, and then I have Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you. I think most of my comments and stuff were covered by Councillor Van Newkirk and my questions by Councillor Barnhart as well. Just a comment that perhaps when we are doing some of the education campaigns, I know that really adding statistics and like facts and figures to Councillor Van Newkirk's point with bringing up how much water gets used in the spray park and stuff, just so people can really wrap their head around, you know, the impact of some of this stuff, and then perhaps the impact of not following through with some of these things. I think when people can see those hard numbers and really put that into perspective, it helps them understand a little bit as to what the impacts are. But otherwise, agree to all the comments. Very relevant and timely presentation, and appreciate that we're looking forward to the education and awareness piece of this, because I think this will be a really, really important aspect to helping people understand why we have to put in some of these restrictions. And to Councillor Van Newkirk's point, that it's not always necessarily just Beaumont's decision to restrict people. It's the Water Commission and kind of the region as a whole, as we all work together. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And just the record too, Councillor McCook sits with me on the Water Commission. Councillor Van Newkirk is our backup for the last couple of years. So we're well versed in the working of the Water Commission, because we understand bringing water to your tap is a complicated process, not quite as easy as people think it is actually. So having said that, Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. And I too have sat on the Water Commission in my past history. So we have lots of water people here where we know how, we think we know how most of it works. My last question is regarding the stakeholder engagement. And on the very last slide, you mentioned the community ambassadors. I wonder if you just want to speak to that a little bit more. Are these ambassadors already chosen? Are you looking for people? Just what is the intention there with community ambassadors?
Through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart. So when we look at community ambassadors, these are both formal and informal positions of leadership. So we're looking at individuals who have a strong voice, such as yourselves, who have also formal leadership and great eyes on you and looking for that leadership. When we look at our community ambassadors, you know, these might be business owners, these might be your average person you see on the street. You know, community ambassadorship does not necessarily mean that they come with a title, but that they do have eyes and influence. So when we look at engaging those community ambassadors, it could be at all levels. It could be your owner of Spice Valley who reshares on their Facebook platform, all the way up to yourselves.
So more of an informal process. It isn't a formal program that we're looking at.
Correct, yeah.
Well, again, I applaud the proactivity of this, and I'm sure we're going to do well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Any further comments from members of council? And seeing none, report as information. So we do appreciate your presentation this evening. Answer all of our questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is item 7.2, council naming policy. Mr. Suter, oh, Madam Clerk.
Sorry, could we get a motion to accept the report for information?
Yes, I forgot. We're not committee of the whole. We're actually in council meeting. So
Okay.
I'll entertain a motion, member of council, to receive it as information. Councilman Newkirk.
Thank you, Mayor. I would motion that the April 23, 2024 report, Water Management Strategy, be received as information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. You wish to speak to the motion? You're good. Thank you. Members of council, any discussion on the motion? See none, council, I'll ask you to vote on the motion before you to accept as information. Councilor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councilor. That carries unanimously, 6-0. All right, now we're on to item 7.2, council naming policy. Mr. Suter, I believe you'll be presenting this evening, and your microphone is on, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Paul Suter, Director of Community Services. I'm also joined this evening for this report by Manager of Long Range Planning, Johannes Wong. He's on Zoom. I believe he's online. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're here this evening for options for council to consider for updating the council naming policy, C31 Revision 2. The background on this is November 14th, the administration was directed after a conversation that council had about renaming a park. And we were directed to come up with some options for reviewing, revising the policy, the council policy C31R2. The background on this is the current policy was in place since 2008 with a revision in September of 2015. The policy sets out the policy and procedures for selecting and applying names to roads, neighborhoods, parks, trails, and municipal facilities. It states that the primary function of naming is to recognize and commemorate noteworthy persons associated with Beaumont, reflect Beaumont's heritage, and to recognize the flora, fauna, and natural features of the community. It also establishes the criteria for the inclusion or non-inclusion of a name or a person to be used in Beaumont. So administration has three options for council's consideration. We're seeking some direction tonight. Before we proceed with those options, I'm going to invite Johannes, if he has any comments at this time, he could weigh in.
Mr. Wong?
No, I don't have any comments. Paul can go on with the presenting the three options, and there will be a discussions, and we'll just move forward with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Appreciate that.
Okay, on that note, I'll proceed with the options. So option one is no changes, status quo. The current policy is working, although it needs to be revised to some degree. So option two would be a minor administrative review this year. We could undertake the work. And when we look through that policy, there's changes that are immediately jumping out at us, the organizational changes that we've made since 2008 and even since 2015. Where there's titles in there and organizational structure references that are not applicable. As well, we've introduced other policies that may or may not align properly with this policy. What comes to mind is Council Policy C33, sponsorship and naming rights, which may or may not be aligned on this naming policy for, especially when it comes to a space, a facility, or a room within a facility sort of thing. So those are something that I think needs to be cleaned up regardless. And then option three would be a fulsome undertaking to review this. And that would include community engagement, which I think could be something for council to consider as a very valuable piece to this exercise. Having said that, that would take some more time, and that would be something we'd propose for the 25 budget. It would be a one-time operational project to do that work, involve the community in this process to make sure we're in line with, times have changed significantly since 2008 and 2015. And when you look at equity, diversity and inclusion per se, and how that applies to a policy when you're naming something, and even potentially how you would rename something that we have currently that may or may not align with what we want to do. So those are the three options. Option three, like I say, would be something we could bring back at budget because there would be a budgetary component to it. I don't have a price tag in mind. That would be something we'd have to look in because we haven't defined the scope. And then, of course, we would have to look at it from there for budget conversation. So with that, unless Johannes got anything further, I'll turn it back to your worship.
Thank you, Mr. Suter. I do have a quick question before I go to Councilman Newkirk, followed by Councilor Penrod. So with option two, Mr. Suter, I'm assuming we have the resources and the horsepower to do option two internally, without any additional cost in this fiscal year, whereas option three may involve potentially outside resources, hence some of the budgetary asks that may come with option three. Is that a reasonable assessment on the report?
Yes, that's correct, your worship.
Thank you. Good enough. Councilman Newkirk, followed by Councilor Penrod, followed by Councilor Telebus, followed by Councilor McCook. Councilor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thank you to administration for pulling this together. For me, it seems like we have a little bit of an opportunity here to make some simple changes and then, consider a piece of budget, right? So where my head is at on this tonight, Mayor, would be moving option two to allow administration to get some work and make those simple updates. And then option three could come back at budget as a one-pager, unfunded, and council could consider that work at budget. So so that's where my head is at tonight. So I don't know if you want to hear from others or if if I should make a motion now or.
Okay. On that note, Madam Clerk, my understanding is Councilman Van Newkirk can make a motion now if he wishes to, or he's free to yield the floor for other questions and then do a motion later. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. Since Councillor Van Newkirk has the floor, it's his choice if he'd like to move the motion. If you would rather wait, that's also acceptable.
Okay, so procedurally, I tend to always ask for questions first, but procedurally, anybody can make a motion anytime because now we're looking at this part of the decision-making process. So just to be clear, you can make a motion anytime. And Councilman Newkirk, I'll go back to you for a motion now if you choose to, or do you want to yield the floor?
Yeah, I think I'll make a motion for option 2, and then that still allows, questions to be asked around that. And so I think we can kind of work this out here. So
Okay,
I'll, yep.
I understood that you also wanted us to proceed with option 3 to have the one pager brought forward at the budget.
Yeah, can we include that in one, or should we do
We can
2?
include that in one. We can say that options 2 and 3, as set out in the report, be approved.
Sure, yeah, let's do that if that provides good
Okay.
clarity.
we'll take a second and let Madam Clerk sort of wordsmith the motion for Councilman Newkirk's consideration. And once you approve the wording, Steve will ask you to move it. And then we'll go to discussion on the motion, which may include some questions from councilors that may already be in their minds as part of the discussion on the motion. So we'll wait
Sounds
for a
good, yeah.
second.
Sounds good, yeah, no, I'll move that options 2 and 3 as set out in the April 23rd, 2024 options for updating the council naming policy and developing a commemorative names program be approved, and I guess I'll speak to it
Thank you,
briefly.
Councilor. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yeah, so I think, as I said earlier, the opportunity here is to get some administrative work done in option 2 during this current period ahead of budget. Then at budget, option 3 brings forward a one-pager unfunded that would be considered as part of the budget deliberations. So I think that allows us to start moving this forward and doing some simple updates that are administratively required under current workload, and then consider the budgetary piece at budget. So we'll see what council thinks of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. So I have a quick question, if you don't mind, for administration. Mr. Suter, operationally speaking, capacity wise, I don't see this as being, is this a doable way of presenting this? While one pager come for budget time without having a lot of work from your department to incur any additional expense?
I'm going to make Joannis do all the work. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we can manage it. That's why we set it up that way, Your Worship. Yeah.
Okay, good. That's what I was, really- just to clear so other members of council know we have capacity should this motion pass. All right, I'll go to Councilor Penrod first, followed by Councilor Telebas, followed by Councilor McCook, followed by Councilor Barnhart. Councilor Penrod.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks to Councillor Van Newkirk for making the motion. It's very much in line with what I was thinking, but I do just want to start my remark by saying I'm a little bit confused the way this came back. My understanding, and just going back and reviewing some of the wording, it's one of these communications always harder than it seems on the face of it. My understanding was that we had essentially asked for 3, and then we got what we got today, which is kind of 3 options. And so I'm just wondering if you can give us some clarity or background. I'm wondering if as you began to do the work, did you realize that maybe there was going to be a more significant amount of labor and research involved, and thus we returned what has been returned today?
Yeah, thanks for the question. The request was to provide options, and I won't speak for Joannis. I'll let him weigh in if he wants. He was the one behind most of this report. But I don't think this was planned activity until that conversation with council about renaming the park. And then when we looked at that, we realized this is, potentially out of step or out of alignment with today's world. So even in the processes, it may more clearly define would help. But I'll offer him a chance to potentially answer that.
Thank you, Councilor Penrod, for the questions. And since the council approved this motion, then administration began to think about what kind of work has to be undertaken to update the policy, and then we realized that in order to have a fulsome review of the policy, it will take a lot of resources and time, and also I think the majority of the project will be public engagement, because a lot of the concerns with naming, particularly the several within the last several years, a lot of the issues around how to name a street, a building, or whatever. So when we review that, we think that it is bigger than what we can do in 2024, and we would require resources. And at the time, we have a budget approved in December. So we thought 2025, and also this year there are designed or planned projects already. So it may not be a good investment of staff time in doing this. So we are thinking maybe it's better for 2025. But instead, of waiting until 2025, there is an opportunity to update administratively, because, like, for example, the policy refers to the city as still the town of Beaumont. So, and those are the things that maybe we can just immediately do to clean the policy up. And as Mr. Suter was saying, there are several things that we have to make the alignment with other policies that has council approved over these years. So there are several things that administration can do to clean it up. And then if council desires to have this fulsome review next year, then we will embark on defining the scope and everything next year.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Penrod.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. That was a really helpful kind of bit of a backgrounder there. It gives me a bit more color on the thought and work that's gone into bringing forward this approach. So really appreciate that. Maybe one more clarification before I'll just speak more directly to the motion. Are we aware, if we do go with what Councillor Van Newkirk has suggested, are we aware of any of our partners or folks that we work with closely, whether it be developers or our friends at the school boards? Are we aware of anyone else that's doing work that might inadvertently get hung up waiting for us to do this piece?
I'm not aware of this, but as we probably working on working on option 2, we can reach out to the stakeholders, like to mention about developers and the school boards. We have very close relationship with them, so we can just reach out to them and ask them for some feedback and input. Definitely.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we just always want to avoid unintentional consequences, right? So then I'll just, if I could, Mayor, speak briefly to the motion.
Yeah, please proceed.
I do believe that this is important work, and option 3, that more fulsome kind of review and rethink of our policy is important work, but it's hard given the current capacity of administration and other, I would say, more pressing issues in the community. It's hard to characterize this work as urgent. And so I think Councillor Van Newkirk's motion strikes a good balance. We have the opportunity to kind of pick some of that low-hanging fruit to clean up our current bylaw or policy while we wait doing that further work. I will also point out that at present, our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee is still paused and awaiting the hiring of a new administrative lead. And I believe their involvement in this work will be critical to turning out a policy that's excellent and can stand the test of time. So I'd like to see us wait on a more major update of the naming policy until such a time as the EDI staff and the committee are in place and functioning well, so that they can give us that frontline feedback. And I think Mr. Wong spoke to that in his response to my first question too. I would ask if we could suggest a couple items that we'd like to see with this kind of option 2. Could we ask that perhaps only names already vetted and currently on the maintained roster would be considered until such a time as a more fulsome review can be undertaken? I'm thinking it may not happen that this is funded in 2025. We have more priorities in Beaumont than we can manage in any given year. And again, I think this is work that we want to do really well. It's important, but it probably won't be urgent in the way that school sites for high school are and things like that. So these 2 suggestions are really, if this gets pushed out a few years, I think These two suggestions would help me vote in favor of this number 2 option. So again, just essentially not taking more names onto the roster that we maintain. And second, asking that preference be given to flora, fauna, and natural features of the community in the interim. That's already in our policy, so it's not a change, it's more of a change of an emphasis. I'm just suggesting that we'd be less likely to run into problems with names based on flora, fauna, or natural features than we would based on a name from an individual. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any?
Yeah, through the mayor,
Consider-
Councilor Penrod, I wouldn't see us making any significant changes to existing names on the roster, to your point. I think this would be just more of a cleanup so that it's at least in alignment with the terminology that we're using today with other policies and the organizational structure and even more modern verbiage around that. But those sort of significant changes would be tied to option 3 because that would likely involve the community's say and how that is formed for the future. Because if we're going to entertain new names and how do we make those decisions in today's world? So yes, if I've answered your question.
Thank you very much. Councilor Telus, followed by Councilor McCook. Councilor Telus, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this one's a no-brainer. Well, Councillor Van Nieuwerk beat me to the button here. He's managed to capture both scenarios, one where we can reevaluate and prioritize come budget time. But the second one, which is most important, we're looking at a policy that's roughly 10 years old and obviously requires a little bit of massaging to update it and modernize it. So I think that's the route we need to go sooner than later. And the fact that it won't have any financial impact is very significant. And yeah, option 1, I don't really think is an option. So I'm in alignment with the proposal here.
Thank you, Councilor. Appreciate that. Councilor McCook, followed by Councilor Barnhart. Councilor McCook, you have the floor.
Thank you. Once again, most of my comments were clarified, especially surrounding the EDI portion of it. Councillor Penrod captured that nicely, and Mr. Wong clarified some of that. So agree with everything that's said, and I'm in support of this motion as well.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Barnhart, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a problem with the direction this is going, if I understand it correctly, but the motion has me a bit confused. And Madam Clerk, maybe you can help me here. If I read that literally, it means that option 3, which says to bring it back as a one-time project, that's essentially approving it. And I think we have to do that at budget time. So I'm just a little bit uncomfortable with the way the motion is read.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Barnhart. Option 3 is about bringing the one pager forward to the budget. So it would be pending council approval at budget. So it's just developing the plan for the budget process for consideration by council.
Would an amendment be in order then to say if approved?
No, it's not necessary because option 3 is simply to prepare the proposal for the budget. So it does not approve the action. It just approves preparing a proposal for the budget.
I wish I felt more comfortable, but I'm looking at the report and how it's written, and it does, I think it's great. I think in the room, we all agree with what you're saying, but I wouldn't want someone else to see the words and think differently. So this would be brought forward as a one-time project for the 2025 operational budget.
We could.
It would be voted on at budget, right? As part of the-
I know that's our intent. I just want
Yes.
to make sure that it's not misunderstood. That's
I
my
get that.
intention.
Yeah.
And I know this is Councillor Van Nieuwkerk's, motion,
I'll
so
go to Councilor Van Nieuwkerk in a
I'll
moment
let
here and
him,
see how he feels about it.
tell me if he thinks that's
I
okay.
understand your concern, but to me, it's pretty straightforward, but I understand your concern for interpretation. So let's just take a second here and see what we can come up with. Councilman Newkirk, you want to speak to this right now while we're still wordsmithing it a bit? Your microphone is on. Oh, hang on. Now it's on. Jeez.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It might put Councillor Barnhart's mind at ease if it just said unfunded in the motion somehow, like, what I would say is the whole proposed budget is unfunded until we approve it, right? And so the, wording that would have probably put you at ease in the report tonight would have been, this would be brought forward as an unfunded, one-time project in the, right? So I think that maybe if we can include that unfunded piece in there, that might put your concerns at ease, maybe.
Councillor Barnhart? Oh, hang on. Mics are being ready. Okay, now your mic's on.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Van Newkirk. My intention is to really look at it when it comes. I mean, that's what I want to do. I don't want to preclude that conversation. Again, I don't know what everyone has in mind in terms of changes. We're not having that conversation yet. And I guess that's the one thing that I was kind of going to say as well, is that if we wait until budget time to have the conversation, you know how we all are rushed and have other things on our mind at budget time. I wonder, and this is a wondering out loud, whether this ought to come back at a certain time that gives us enough time to debate some of the issues around it, rather than just be at budget time. Because I think
Councillor
there's,
Barnhart, look at the amendment, and I'll see if that's okay from your perspective. I'll ask Councillor Newkirk if he's okay with it. But my understanding is option 2 will come back to us before budget in the fall, right?
Option 2,
will
yes.
come back to us.
Yeah.
And if council approves option 2 based on the rework, it won't be an option 3 at a budget because we've already approved it. If we say, nope, it needs more work, we'll consider option 3 at budget. That allows us to do that. Is the amended wording to your satisfaction, Councillor Martin, before going to Councilman Newkirk, to approve the friendly amendment?
sure, that works for me, Mayor. See what
Councilman
Councillor Van
Newkirk?
Newkirk said.
Councilman Newkirk, does the amended wording meet your satisfaction on the motion?
Yeah, thank you. I think that provides a little bit more clarity, just on the concerns I heard Councillor Barnhart raise. And there's a couple gates to step through on this now for us, right? The option 2 comes, then option 3 is prepared as an unfunded one pager. We can discuss alongside everything else and prioritize up or down. If and when we hear back on option 2, then, if there's a discussion brought forward, we could motion at that point as well. So thank you, administration. Do you need me to move the amended motion?
Sure, might be good just to have.
Sure, let's do that. Yeah. So I will move the amended motion that option 2, housekeeping amendments, and option 3, preparing an unfunded one pager for budget, as set out in the April 2024 options for updating the council name and policy and developing a commemorative names program be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate the discussion from all members of council. Councilman Cook, your hand's not up. That's good. Don't see any hands up there. So having said that, any final comments, Councilman Newkirk, on your motion? None? Thank you. Council, I'll ask you to vote on the motion before you. Councilman Cook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor. That carries unanimously, Council 6-0. Appreciate that. Next on our agenda is bylaw 8.1, bylaw 1045-24, property tax and supplementary property tax, first, second, and third reading. Mr. DeBlanco, I believe you're presenting this evening. And I'll just find the microphone that you're sitting at. Give me 1 second there. Yep, your microphone is on when you're ready, sir.
Thank you. Good evening to the mayor and council. I'm Curtis DeBlanco. I'm the director of finance for the city. Before council this evening is a report on the 2024 property tax bylaw and supplementary tax bylaw. Council approved the 2024 municipal operating budget, and which includes a 6.45 property tax increase. This was subject to adjustments based on the finalized property assessments, and the amended budget was passed last week, reflects these final adjustments. Okay. This bylaw has been prepared based on the amended budget that was approved last week. The bylaw allows the city to collect $28,322,100 in municipal taxes and $9,926,500 in requisition taxes. Thank you. That are then remitted to the respective requisitioning entities. Although the blended tax levy, which is net of growth, has increased 6.545%, the impact of this increase between properties will vary. Tonight, as part of the report, we brought a presentation on how tax rates get set to better inform both council and the public on how tax rates are set. Administration has the report that outlines the process. So the process is guided by Council Policy C-48, which is the taxation policies. And this ensures taxes are levied in a fair, transparent, and equitable manner. With that, the first step in setting tax rates is to determine the revenue requirement, which is, of course, City Council approving a budget. Within the budget are many sources of revenue and expenses, and the difference between any non-tax sources of revenue, things like fees, permits, investment income, and the budgeted expenses creates the delta, which is known as the revenue requirement. This revenue requirement is the amount needed to be levied through taxation in order to balance the budget. The revenue requirement was set at the number that is on the screen, the 28,308,200, as part of the budget approval in December. And this included a estimate of 1,200,500 for growth revenue. Once again, reflects that 6.45% tax increase. The next step in setting tax rates is to finalize the assessment, which becomes known in January. The city's municipal assessment finalizes the assessment for the year. Assessment notice are sent out or mailed out in February. And the budgeted forecast for growth, which is that 1.25 million, gets removed and replaced with the actual. Once the amended finalized revenue requirement is known, which is why the budget amendment always comes before the tax bylaw. So on the slide on the screen, we see the top kind of set of numbers there is that originally approved budget. Add in what the actual growth number is, as well as the increase on the actual growth, that 6.45%, and reduce the estimate from the amount. And that gets us to the unrounded revenue requirement, which is that 28,322,098. And as we see on the bottom table there is what goes in the amended budget. We round to the nearest 100. So we see the actual revenue requirement after the finalized assessment. On this slide is a visual representation of what that process looks like, where the blue squares represent how a city's tax base grows from one year to the next. The blue square on the left reflects the amount of municipal taxes collected in 2023, which is 25.4 million. The green bar on the top on that left square represents increased revenue from the physical growth of the city, so new buildings, what have you. The orange bar on the right, that reflects the approved tax increase through the budget process, that's 6.45%. And then there's a small yellow square in the top corner, which reflects the impact of the increase on the growth. So that was that 76,576 on this slide. Adding these components together brings the city to its new tax base for 2024, which is the blue square on the right. Next step is to determine the amount of tax revenue that's applicable to setting a rate. So within the overall budget for municipal taxes, there are forecasts for items like supplemental taxes, adjustments, as well as annex properties. The city's assessment does include annex properties that at one point were a part of Leduc County, and per the annexation agreement are still taxed at Leduc County's rates, or the lesser of the city's or Leduc County's rates rather. And therefore they're not used to calculate the city's actual rate. So removing those items gets us to that bottom number, which is the actual revenue requirement for rate setting. After that, the next step administration takes is converting any non-residential assessment. So the city's taxation policy sets a general municipal tax ratio of 1.4 to 1 for non-residential versus residential rates. The Municipal Government Act specifies that this ratio cannot exceed 5 to 1. So calculation on the screen brings essentially the residential and non-residential assessment on par to set the residential rate. Next step, which is just calculating the rate. So we take that number, which has the R beside it, is the numerator. The assessment becomes the denominator, and that calculates the residential rate. Multiplying the residential rate by the ratio set forth in Council Policy C48, which is that 1.4 ratio, provides the non-residential rate. Rates commonly are displayed in mills, which refers to $1,000 worth of assessment value. Believe this is where the term mill rate comes from. My Latin's not very good, but I believe that's Latin. Anyway, so that gets us to how we commonly see rates displayed on the bottom right corner, which is 6.855 for the residential rate and 9.597 and change for the non-residential. Other items that rates are set for are requisition taxes. The same process for dividing the required revenue to requisition is divided by the applicable assessment to set the rates. And as already mentioned, 9.9 million is the amount that gets collected by the city as requisition taxes and then further remitted to each of the entities on the right-hand side of that slide. The numbers on the screen are the finalized screenshots from the tax bylaw. The city provides both the overall assessment, the rate, and then the tax levy that gets yielded from that rate, which matches what is in the amended budget. The table on the left shows a ratepayer what their overall rate would be, including requisition taxes such as school authorities and the Leduc Regional Housing Foundation and designated industrial property if it's applicable. One important concept within the City of Beaumont's taxation policy is revenue neutrality. This is especially important to realize as ratepayers review their assessment notices. So the city's municipal property tax revenues shall not increase or decrease due to market assessment value increases or decrease. This approach protects both the city and taxpayers from large shifts in property taxation resulting from market value fluctuation. So as things like inflation go up or down, that doesn't impact the amount of tax that the city collects. So the example on the screen, what we see is how an individual taxpayer's bill is affected is based on how much their assessment either went up or down in comparison to the average. So I'll flip to the next screen. It might be a little more helpful. The average for the year was an increase of 5.4. So a ratepayer whose assessment went up 5.4% would expect to have a tax bill that was exactly that 6.45% increase. There are two factors that influence a ratepayer's bill. That's assessment and tax rate. Like I said, if their assessment increased in line with inflation, that's when you're going to see that exact 6.45%. Flipping back to this one, if a ratepayer's assessment was lower than that 5.4%, they would expect their tax bill to increase less than 6.45. In turn, if their assessment was up more than 5.4%, they would expect to see a bill higher than that 6.45%. A lot of numbers, a lot of ins and outs, but trying to display it on the screen as transparent and easy for the folks at home as well as everyone in the room to understand is a challenge, and this is why the information is being presented as such tonight. As already mentioned, the ratepayer impact from 23 to 24 on an average property or a property with an average inflationary increase rather is 5.4% is approximately $196 a year. A useful practice to undertake on an annual basis is benchmarking and looking at where the city's rates compare against regional competitors. Items to consider looking at are residential tax rate, non-residential tax rate, tax ratios of different municipalities, assessment split, and then year-over-year change in assessment split. Administration compiled information from 2023 from the municipalities on the screen. Reason we use 2023 data is a lot of municipalities are in the exact same process we are in right now, and that data is not available just yet for 2024. So on the screen, we're looking at the residential rate of regional comparators for 2023. As you can see, the city of Beaumont sits approximately right in the middle, is actually the median, I believe, of the municipalities selected. You see there's a lot of reasons for the variation in the rates. You look at the bottom end of the screen, you have the counties that will have much different situations than an urban municipality. A lot of farmland will impact their rates. And then as we look at the top of the screen, we're getting further away from the city of Edmonton with the city of Camrose and city of Wetaskiwin. They're going to have different factors impact their rates, including things like the assessment value of an average home in each of those cities. But Once again, it's useful to benchmark against regional comparators. Next up is non-residential tax rates with municipality selected. City of Beaumont sits kind of in that lower third on non-residential tax rates. A big factor on this is where each of the municipalities set their res non-res ratio. But as we can see on the screen, City of Wetaskiwin, City of Edmonton are up in that 20 number, 20 mils as we call it. City of Camrose 13, City of St. Albert 12, and then very comparable with Town of Devon, City of Leduc, and Town of Warrenville is where the City of Beaumont's rate are. Next indicator is just where those res non-res ratios are. As you can see, the City of Edmonton sets theirs at almost 3 times their res rates. Leduc County sets theirs at 2.25. Wetaskiwin looks like they have theirs exactly double, and the City of Beaumont has set within taxation policy at 1.4. It's been 1.4 for a number of years. Next one is just non-residential assessment. As everyone in the room well knows, City of Beaumont is quite low on non-residential assessments compared to other municipalities in the region. Areas like Leduc, the county, Strathcona County, Leduc County are much different situations than the City of Beaumont, as is City of Fort Saskatchewan. But all of those factors contribute to where a city's rates ultimately get set and the budget that a council sets for a City of Beaumont. Lastly is just looking at the 5-year trend on assessment split. Not a whole lot of fluctuation in the past 5 years between residential and farmland versus non-res. It's not that non-residential assessment is not growing in the city, but residential assessment has seen substantial growth and is slightly outpacing non-residential assessment over the 5-year term. With that, the approval of the bylaw will allow the city to levy municipal taxes totaling $28,322,100, including revenue attributable to real property growth of $263,800. Sorry, a lot of numbers I rattled off tonight. Once again, this includes an estimate of $79,000 for annex properties and an estimate of $120,600 for supplemental taxes and adjustment. With that, a property with an average inflationary increase will see an increase of 6.45 on the municipal portion of their tax notice. That concludes my presentation for this evening. I'll turn it back over to council, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blanco. Appreciate that. So here's how we're going to proceed. We are doing all 3 readings this evening, as we do every year with this particular bylaw at this time of year. So at this time, I'll entertain clarifying questions from council. At this point, it's not the point to entertain your opinions or concerns or observations. Strictly clarifying questions, we do a first reading. At second reading, that's the time to entertain any concerns you have as a councillor, observations, concerns, criticisms, endorsements of the policy. That's for second reading. Okay, so right now, I'll entertain clarifying questions only before I go to first reading. Councillor Penrod, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mayor Daniluk, and appreciate your coaching on the process there. So as a clarifying piece, I'm looking at page 2 of the council report towards the bottom of the page. Therefore, so right after the quote given to illustrate revenue neutrality. So this is not a catch or a gotcha. I just actually caught this myself. So just for clarity for the public record, I think this is a typo. It reads, therefore, the city does see additional revenue from increased housing prices. Your presentation made it clear the city does not. So that's just a typo?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Penrod, that would be a typo. So yes, the city does not see any additional revenue from inflation on housing prices.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a great catch. I didn't catch that myself either when I read through it. Appreciate that. Seeing no further questions for clarifying purposes, we can, and part of debate in the second reading, ask some clarifying questions at that point if something else comes to mind. So with that, I'll close clarifying questions. I'll ask member council to move first reading of bylaw 1045-24. Councillor Penrod, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. I move that bylaw 1045-24, property tax and supplementary property tax be given first reading.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion? for first reading? Seeing none, council, would you please vote on first reading of the bylaw? Councilor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor?
Thank you, Councilor. That also carries unanimously, 6-0. At this time, I'll entertain a motion for second reading, after which time we'll be in the debate process, comments, concerns, and so on, members of council. As a member of Councilor Newkirk, I see your hand is up. Please, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll move that bylaw 1045-24 be given second reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Do you wish to speak to the motion at this point? Thank you. Members of council who wish to speak to the motion, speak to the bylaw tonight. Too many words tonight, way too many words. Speak to the bylaw on second reading. Councilor Telebus, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess just one question for clarification to Mr. DeBlanco there. In terms of the assessment split, it's interesting to see these numbers, and I can appreciate how you kind of give a little more clarity that because we're seeing more significant growth on the residential side, it's negatively impacting our non-residential numbers. In terms of capacity and availability of these businesses, are we trending to see a continuous reduction based off of your knowledge in terms of non-residential versus residential if we continue to grow at the rate we are?
Mr. Blanco, your mic is on.
So thank you for the question and through the mayor to Councilor Natellenboss. Looking just at the past 5 years and doing a basic trend analysis, what we do see is residential growth is outpacing non-residential. We see on each of the years, there is a very slight percentage point tick in the opposite direction that is really intended. But if there's any more clarity on non-residential growth versus residential, I mean, colleagues in planning and development can speak to that. But yes, it's just looking at the numbers alone on the last slide, there's been a trend in the last 5 years going the direction where non-residential percentage as it makes up assessment is reducing.
Perfect. Thank you for that response. And then I guess just for myself, more so clarity for the public. Voting on this bylaw is obviously voting on the process and supporting how the decisions were made and the numbers that were put together. I just want to make it clear, my standpoint, I didn't necessarily agree with all the increases within the budget, but I do appreciate the process and everything that was followed to get us to this point. So I'm not voting in favor of the increase, but I'm voting in favor of the process.
Thank you, Councilor. I do appreciate that. I think all of us at budget workshop, not every single line do we agree with individually, but you either pass the budget or you don't. And I appreciate your comment on voting for the process, not necessarily the number itself. And I do appreciate that perspective. All of us have to go through our budget as best we can and make our best decisions we possibly can. And I appreciate that. Any further questions from members of council on second reading? I have one question before I go to Councilor Penrod, if you don't mind. Mr. Blanco, the revenue neutral slide is extremely helpful. It does help paint the picture of how things are assessed and how the tax rate works. It's very, very good work. And I think we should maybe put that in maybe a newspaper article, Mr. Berzos, next time I do a newspaper. Well, I'll talk about that at a later time. But it's very, very helpful. It's very, very helpful to be clear, understand how the process works. If assessment goes up or down and tax rate up or down, it's confusing at times. And this is very, very helpful. And it took some time to get that put together. I want to thank you for that on behalf of council and our citizens. Mr. Penrod, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mayor. Just want to continue along the line of giving kudos. Thank you for the excellent report. And thank you for the work that's going in to not just making sure our financials are done the way they need to be done, but then taking that extra step to make sure that we're communicating as best we can to the public who isn't thinking about this stuff every single day kind of thing, right? Sometimes we get so familiar with the data or the terminology, it can be difficult to remember that not everybody speaks Latin, what is a mill and things like that. So really appreciate the effort that's gone into communicating this well. And I want to turn around too and thank the members of the public that have taken an interest and dug into these reports and reached out for extra clarification. I know reach to administration or reach to other elected officials. Know that you're heard and that we know that this is an area where we want to strive for continual improvement, right? In all of our procedures. And so thanks for administration for demonstrating that so well. And we'll continue to approve our processes. And I know there's some tweaks to our budget workshop process and the way we do all of this work based on your feedback again. So I just want the public to hear that. And I want to say, Mary, you pointed out the slide on revenue neutrality. I think page 4, the tax base 2023 versus 2024. I almost skipped over that slide because it doesn't look too busy. I'm really glad that you took the time to explain that. And it may be that we could tweak that even more so that because when you explained what all's included in that slide, it really brought some things clear that are sometimes tricky to understand with this process. So thanks for that. And I think that's an innovation, right? Like that's something that we put together for this presentation.
Yes, that's correct. That was brought for a number of reasons, just to bring transparency as well as re-educate council on just our process as well as the public on how the city of Beaumont sets its tax rates.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. And I would encourage anyone who finds this process a little mysterious to really kind of go back and review your presentation specifically on that infographic, because I think there's a lot of helpful information there. Last thing I just wanted to say, Mayor, thanks for clarifying again. It is annually our practice to pass this particular bylaw for second and third reading in one meeting. Just wondering if you could give us some color on why that is.
I think what it comes down to is, Mr. Blanco, enlighten me if I missed something, but I think it's more a matter of timing because we have to get the assessment, the notices out in a timely fashion to our residents, and to give Mr. Blanco enough time to make sure there's nothing else unforeseen that pops up that could affect the budget tax increase. That's the Reader's Digest version. I probably missed a couple of key points, but that's why we tend to do it in this last meeting in April to have enough time to get the assessments out to our residents for July 1st. Mr. Blanco, did I miss anything?
Sure, I can provide a little bit more detail. A few reasons. There's a bit of an order of operations that goes with the timing of the year-end process and the audit, as well as the budget amendment and setting of the tax rates. In past years, like let's say 5-6 years ago, some of these items were brought all on the same day, and in doing that, there risks adjustments to the budget or changes stemming from the year end that wouldn't get reflected, or administration wouldn't have the ability to update the tax bylaw in a timely manner. So the ideal order of operations is bringing the financial statements and the year end surplus and any reallocation. Now there was a delay with that that was approved at the last council meeting, but that was brought in May. But with the budget needs to get passed first, and that allows administration to then set rates. There is another piece around the annex properties. We at the City of Beaumont, we do need to wait to see what Leduc County sets their rates at, because although it's a non-material amount, it does allow us to set basically to that 6th decimal point what the City of Beaumont's rate. In absence of that, we would be estimating and could potentially be off some thousands of dollars, but there is a stage there where we do need to wait for Leduc County to set their rates, which they did today.
Thank you. And am I correct in saying that part of what we're waiting on is not just Leduc County, but also the province to set the rates for the school requisitions?
Absolutely. That would be the other piece is they don't confirm them until a little bit later. They do give us advance notice of what the requisition amounts will be, as well as our equalized assessment, but getting the actual final confirmation comes a little bit later. So yes, that's absolutely correct.
Thank you. So just to summarize, I think what I'm learning in this process is that there's a lot of information coming from many directions, and the city's doing the best we can to compile all that information, bring it to full public view, and then move it down the road to operations so that everybody can get their notices in time and pay their tax bills on time.
Exactly.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Thanks, Mr. Belenko. Additional information on the explanation. Seeing no further comments from members of council, we are at second reading. So with that, council, I'll ask you to vote on second reading of the bylaw. Councillor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor. That passes unanimously, 6-0. Council, the next step is to ask for consideration and a motion to move to third reading. If this is not passed unanimously, third reading is delayed on the next council meeting, which should that happen, it'll probably upset the apple cart a little bit in our procedure, just so you know. And there's one budget I mentioned earlier is it is coming back in one night, but that's how we tend to do it, given all the factors that are involved. So with that, I will move that bylaw 1045-24 be considered for the third reading. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, council, I'll ask you to vote on consideration of moving to third reading. Councillor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor. That passed unanimously. Thank you, Council. With that, I'll entertain a motion from any members of Council to move to third reading of bylaw 1045-24. Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the bylaw 1045-24 be given third reading.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion? See none. Council, would you please vote on third reading of the bylaw? Councillor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor. That passed unanimously, 6-0. With that, it's 7:49. I'm going to take a 10-minute break. Back 8 o'clock promptly. We have 2 more bylaws to go through. It shouldn't take too long, I don't think. We've got a procedure down pretty good tonight. Thank you. We are back after a short break. It's 8:02 here and back in council chambers. We continue with our agenda, which is item 8.2, bylaw 1052-2 water and wastewater, first, second, and third reading. Administration already did a presentation on this. There's no need to redo the presentation. So with that, I will entertain a motion to go to first reading, and then we can ask any clarifying questions as part of second reading if we could, as part of the debate process. So is a member of council willing to move first reading of the bylaw? Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that bylaw 1052-24, the water and wastewater bylaw, be given first reading.
Thank you, Councillor. I get no clarifying questions because we already had the presentation already. We already asked those a few minutes ago, so I'll go straight to the vote on first reading. Council, please vote on first reading. Councillor McCook, you're with us. How do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Council. That passed unanimously, 6-0. I'll now entertain a motion from Council for a second reading, at which time we do some debating and ask any additional clarifying questions. Councilman Newkirk.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that bylaw 1052-24 be given second reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Do you wish to speak to the motion at this time? Thank you. Any members of council have any clarifying questions in retrospect from what was presented earlier, or any concerns, comments on second reading of the bylaw? Seeing none from any members of council. Councilor McCook, I don't see your hand up. You're okay? Just make sure you're clear. You're good, no questions?
Yep, good, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. With that, Council, I'll ask you to vote on second reading of the bylaw. Councilor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor. That carries unanimously, 6-0. We are now at the third reading point. I do have a motion to be considered for third reading. Same procedure follows if this is not done unanimously. Third reading will be postponed to the next council meeting, which is May 14th. So with that, I will move that bylaw 1052-24 be considered for third reading. Council, how do you vote? Oh, sorry, any questions on the consideration? See none. Council, how do you vote? Please vote on consideration for third reading. Councilor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, that passes unanimously, 6-0. With that, Council, I will entertain a motion from a member of council that bylaw 1052-24 be given the third reading. I'll move it myself, that bylaw 1052-24 be given third reading this evening. Any discussion from members of council on third reading? Seeing none, Council, would you please vote on third reading of the bylaw? Councilor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor. That also passes unanimously, 6-0. Thank you, Council. Next, we have an item on our agenda, 8.3, bylaw 1053-24, Community Standards Bylaw Amendment, first, second, and third reading. Now, we did not debate this earlier, so Madam Clerk, how do we proceed here?
Mr. Mayor, I can quickly introduce this item and then council can consider the readings. So this is just the housekeeping amendment required for the change to the community standards bylaw in alignment with the alcohol in parks. So
Mhm.
you'll recall that we did make a expansion to that program so that we are allowing alcohol in one additional park in the upcoming summer season. So the change to the bylaw is really just to allow alcohol to be consumed in public in those designated alcohol sites. While we were making that amendment, we also noticed a few typos that were needing to be addressed. So they are also addressed in the amending bylaw. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you and to council if there are any questions.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate that. Any questions from members of council for clarification? Councillor Penrod, you have the floor.
Yeah, maybe just one quick clarification, Mr. Mayor. My understanding is the expansion of the program it's all within the contiguous park, Four Seasons Park, but now an additional area within Four Seasons Park, correct?
Madam Clerk?
The expansion was I'm going to get the name wrong now, the Lions RV.
Mr. Lewicki, would you care to jump in on this conversation? Let me find your mic. Hang on a second. Your mic is on.
Through the mayor to Councillor Penrod, it was the Jerry Petsula RV Park area. There was a section in the previous, in a different report where we outlined the areas in that park and then around Don Sparrow. There's the two separate areas that were considered, and the RV park was the expansion.
Thank you. And the areas will be signed as well.
Councilor Penrod, does that answer your question? Thank you very much. Councilor Telebas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. The only concern I have, it was a concern that I raised initially in regards to this, was the type of containers within public parks. We have a lot of children playing within these areas, and I see that we've decided against restricting the type of containers. So my concern is that there's the potential for intoxication, which is one thing, but broken glass throughout our parks and children in and around there. So I'm just curious as to why it was recommended against restricting types of containers that we transport or consumer alcohol in.
Oh, Madam Clerk, please.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Natellenboss, we did look at that and try to find some options. There wasn't really a viable option that was an easy amendment to our community standards bylaw that wouldn't then raise other questions about what containers you could carry other liquids in. So on the advice of legal and in consultation with RCMP and municipal enforcement, because there were no incidents recorded, we are opting we're recommending not to try and capture that in the bylaw. However, this is a very small expansion of the program. So we feel that we can continue to monitor for any issues that arise and continue to make adjustments. If that were to become an issue, we would need to find a way to address it, of course.
Perfect, thank you. So just to clarify procedurally, if this does become an issue, we'll come up with a solution to prevent this from reoccurring or occurring.
Madam Clerk.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Natellenboss. Yes, we want to continue to reevaluate the program. That's why we were really recommending a very gradual growth rather than a more significant expansion of the program to all parks, let's say, which would probably invite a lot of other unforeseen issues. So we just want to be cautious with how we're expanding this program.
Perfect, thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate your knowledge throughout all departments within administration, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Member Council willing to move first reading? Councillor Penrod.
Thank you. I'd like to move that bylaw 1053-24, Community Standards Bylaw Amending Bylaw, be given first reading.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Council, would you please vote on first reading? Councilor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor. That carries unanimously, 6-0. Is a member of council willing to move second reading of the bylaw, which will allow us to move to any debate or further comments from members of council? Pardon me. I'll move that bylaw 1053-24 be given second reading. I will not speak to the motion at this time. I'll let members of council speak to it. Councilor Telebus, you have the floor.
Sorry, Mayor, that was just to move the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it on my screen. I apologize. I'll come to you for something else then, later on. Thank you, Councilor. Any discussion on, sorry, any current discussion, comments, debate on second reading of the bylaw? Seeing none, Council, I'll ask you to vote on second reading of the bylaw. Councilor Cook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Council. That carries unanimously, 6-0. Also, at this time, we are going to need a motion for consideration to move to third reading and to reiterate earlier comments. Should consent by third reading, for third reading not be carried unanimously, third reading will be delayed until the next council meeting, which is May 14th. So remember, council willing to move consideration for third reading. Councilor Telebus, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that bylaw 105324 be considered for third reading.
Thank you, Councilor. Council, would you please vote on the motion to give consideration to third reading this evening? Councilor McCook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. That carries unanimously, Council, 6-0. With that, move on to the final stage for bylaw 1053-24 amendment for third reading. Is a member of council willing to move third reading of the bylaw? Councilman Newkirk, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move that bylaw 1053-24 be given third reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Discussion on the motion.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing none, Council, would you please vote on third reading of the bylaw? Councilor Cook, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Councilor. That carries unanimously, 6-0. Thank you, Council and Administration for the work on this bylaw amendment. Next, on our agenda is item 9, Councilor inquiries, responses, and reports. Councilor Barnhart, I believe you have an inquiry this evening. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two inquiries, actually. if I may.
Right, 2.
So the first one would be if the administration could come back with information on when and how often we'll hear updates on our social master plan. That's coming from the strategic plan. I thought there could be more information added in there. It covers affordable housing, seniors, age-friendly, et cetera. So I'd like to see that come back if I could, as to how often it will come back. And the second inquiry, if I may,
Please,
Mayor?
yeah.
Yes, a resident asked me, and I also would like to know the answer to this question. When street cleaning is being done, carried out as it was again, and early in the year, the spring season, are notifications put out for the Ken Nickel area for the park and ride, and on a timely basis? Just a little bit of information on that. Residents were caught off guard, so that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have administration get back to you on those 2 inquiries. Thank you, Councilor. Any further councilor inquiries this evening or reports from members of council? Seeing none, we do have Councilor Barnhart's report has been submitted. Information is part of our agenda package. Thank you for doing that. Next on our agenda then is item 10, CEO update. Deputy Premier, you just got elevated. Deputy CEO, Ms. O'Neill, would you care to look after that for us this evening?
You bet. Thank you for the promotion, Mayor.
Oh, you're welcome. No problem. There's no pay increase, by the way. It's just a title.
Well, good evening, Council. I'm pleased to provide the following update on behalf of CAO Schwartz. Last week, Mayor Daniluk and CAO Schwartz attended the Alberta Motor Transport Association's annual conference. This proved to be a really great networking event and government relations for Mayor and CAO, since Premier Smith and Ministers Ellis and Dreeshen were attendant. So well worth it. Well done. In economic development, to support our efforts, we have a series of Invest in Beaumont posts going out on our social media weekly. We encourage folks to look at these posts and to share them with their networks. And a comprehensive investment attraction marketing plan will be presented to council in June. So it's all going to tie back together. In infrastructure, speaking of street sweeping, residential street sweeping is in progress and will continue for the next 2 months. Sweeping occurs from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. on weekdays with no weekend sweeping. We ask residents to watch for signs in your neighborhood for scheduled sweeping and to ensure vehicles are off the streets during your scheduled times to avoid getting a ticket. And of course, please be mindful of crews and equipment as we navigate during your daily commute. We are 3 weeks into the new expanded transit service, and we have seen a slight uptick in our ridership. We're 3 weeks in, but administration will continue to share ridership information through CAO updates to council. And lastly, as Beaumont continues to grow, safely navigating through the city remains a top priority. From April 18th to April 30th, residents are invited to help shape a safer community by using the Safe Step tool on the city website to suggest up to 3 crosswalks that could benefit from safety improvements. That's it. Short and sweet today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Appreciate that. Any questions for Ms. O'Neill for our CEO's report? Councillor Penrod.
Thanks, Mayor. Not a question, but a kudos. We had some resident feedback that they had more to say than what the character limit would allow within the survey that you mentioned last. And a couple quick emails, and that issue was resolved, and residents are free to tell us exactly how they say safe they want a particular intersection. So that, I think that kind of responsiveness is so appreciated and goes a long ways towards our making sure that people continue the level of engagement we want to see. So
Fantastic.
great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do appreciate that comment. It was nice to have that quick response and give our residents a chance to provide more feedback. That's ideal. Thank you very much. Are there any notices of motion this evening from members of council? I'm not aware of any, but some may have popped up today at some point. Seeing none, I'll do a quick announcement before we move to the end of our adjournment here. This past week, I was elected by my fellow mayors to be the vice chair of the shareholders group of Edmonton Global. That sounds very grandiose, but it's really not that grandiose. It's more a matter of the mayors of the Edmonton Global get together and we choose a chair and a vice chair to advocate on behalf of mayors in terms of Edmonton Global. I'm also in the working group on restructuring Edmonton Global as well too. And I will be attending a trade mission the first week in May. I'm going to Ottawa for 3 days at Edmonton Global to meet with parliamentary committees as well as MPs on promoting business for Edmonton region. So I'm pretty excited about doing that on behalf of Beaumont and of course the Edmonton Global region as a whole. So I have no further announcements this evening. With that, we have nothing in our closed sessions, all on consent agenda. So with that, no further business to be cut this evening at 8:19. We are adjourned. Thank you and enjoy your evening.